Welcome to Governance Bites. My name is Mark Banicevich, and I am very privileged to, I think this is the third time, spend time with Dr. Peter Crowe. Peter, thank you very much again for your time. Peter is probably one of the globe's most renowned governance experts, a PhD in corporate governance and strategy. He, as well as his own board experience, he has created and taught courses on governance in places as diverse as Asia and India, Africa, Kenya, Eastern Europe, Lithuania, and in New Zealand itself for both the Institute of Directors and Governance New Zealand. He has spoken about governance on 5 continents, and he works and advises boards around the world. In fact, the last 2 weeks you have been to half a dozen countries.
Yeah, something like that. I lose count a little bit.
Yeah, I bet you do.
But I was up in the UK and Europe for 5 days.
Right.
Doing some MBA teaching, seeing my mentor, because nobody knows all the answers, doing some speaking, and then doing some confidential advisory.
So not only am I lucky to spend time with you, I'm lucky to catch you in the country.
Okay, it sounds busy, but it's a matter of prioritisation, and what more or what greater calling can there be than to pursue your passion?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And today, actually, that kind of ties us back to today's topic, because I must admit I'm a bit of a geek.
Are you?
I am. And I like knowledge for knowledge's sake. So I would like to pick your brain on governance for governance's sake.
Pick away.
First question, what is governance?
What an outstanding start. So I will answer the question, but let me give you one piece of context. In the last 20 or so years, there are 3 questions that keep coming up, and people ask me, right? And they haven't changed. So what is corporate governance? What is the role of the board? And how should governance be practiced? So in asking the question that you just have, you've joined the club of asking this question, because often we talk about governance, but we don't confirm our understanding of what it is. What is governance? So governance is an old word. It's a word that comes from the Greek. The Greek word, the etymology is kybernetes, which simply means to steer, to guide, to pilot. And the context with the Greeks were the sailing vessels, great master mariners, moving around the islands across the Mediterranean. So there's 2 things that come out of that. One is with a goal in mind, a purpose, not stated in the definition but implied. And the second is an active contribution. You can't steer and guide a pilot, a vessel, a company and anything else if you're just sitting there passively. So it's about making it go forward, but also making adjustments based on whatever the current situation in front of you is, given the long-term destination. Old term, static definition, 3,500 years.
Well, I guess we can almost go back that far when we start thinking about early companies, right? Because they've been around since Roman times.
Yep.
We tend to think of early companies from things like the 17th century with the East India Company in the UK.
Yep.
But it has been around a lot longer. They were established in those days by royal charter.
That's right.
What was governance like then?
So the royal charters were basically a delegation, an endorsement, when we were pulling together capital to buy vessels to go and do stuff, right? So very much it was the days of empire, and there was competition all over the place. So most of the time, absentee shareholders, board, but it was basically about how do we make sure that the people doing the work are doing what we want them to, and making sure that that the results that we desire, which is great wealth, because we want to go to India and get the tea or get the slaves or whatever it is, that comes back so that we can trade those commodities and get rich.
So you used inverted commas around the word of board. Was there any sort of governance happening in those days? Was there a group of people getting together and monitoring what was going on, or was it all?
Yes, absolutely, but it was probably in conservative gentlemen's clubs.
Yes. Given our location in the Northern Club, it's quite an irony that that's the case.
It is, but the club here is a little bit more egalitarian today, and it's fantastic.
It is beautiful. I love this.
It's a great environment here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
When did the concept of corporate governance arise? As we think of it today, when did that become prominent?
Just before my life began. So you added a little bit on the end. When did it become prominent? So may I answer you twice?
Please.
Right, so corporate governance as a term was only first coined in 1960, just before I was born. Mm-hmm. And so we had those practices of governing, of controlling and all of that much earlier than that, as we've discussed, but the term was only first coined in 1960 to mean the structure and functioning of the corporate polity. So it was a term applied to the board's work and how it arranged its affairs to provide that bridge between largely absent shareholders and manager who were assumed to have different incentives and priorities, right? So that's the term. It basically sat there on an academic shelf for a decade or more. Milton Friedman, 1970, the exclusive social purpose of an organisation was to increase profits, is our common understanding of it, but the rest of the sentence, without so much as a comma, was so that it's done so within the rules of the game. But we use that to provide a foundation for capitalism and just strident wealth maximisation version of capitalism, but that's not what Friedman said. But corporate governance as a term really bounced out into our business consciousness around about the year 2000.
So
it's as recent as that. Mm-hmm. And what's happened since is two things. One, the nomenclature is now common, and two, we still get confused about what it is. So I here will get the governance to look at that. So that's management talking about the board, but they've confused the function, which is governance, with the structure, which is the board. Mm. Or they conceive governance as a process, which sort of sounds like it's got a beginning, a middle and an end, but I don't know where that is. And the third one is that it's a policy framework which says if you follow this, then goodness will come out. But that's complying my way to success, which doesn't work.
No.
So three things. The root, 3,500 years old. The term, 65 years old. The prominence in practice, us 2.5 decades. And so with that, my father was a company director for a dairy company, lifelong farmer, so I'm from the land, and so pragmatism's important. In his day, and he came off his last board in 2001, you would see annual reports that would have a section in there in the notes called directorship, and they'd talk about the activities of the board. Now, you don't see that section, but you see a section called governance. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, it talks about process, the secretarial stuff, the compliance stuff, all of which is important, but it's not actually sufficient. So the words continued to develop. In medical field, you get clinical governance, or the technologists want to talk about IT governance, and some even want to talk about enterprise governance or whole of business governance. I continue to hold the view that the board of directors has got that overall steering and guiding, and so corporate governance, quote unquote, is the term that describes the work of the board.
Okay. Well,
sorry, that was a bit of a wide swathe, but hopefully
that's a I'm the sort of person that likes to start with the big picture and narrow down to the details. Okay. So that was a fantastic answer for me. Thank you.
Cool.
At what stage of maturity then is corporate governance, given that it's only 2.5 decades old? Is it past its infancy? How quickly is it evolving?
Oh, look, we talk about it every day. And I was at an event last night, and there was I was on the panel, but there was a prime speaker who was saying that she's been involved in corporate governance for 20, 25 years. Academic, I'm not sure she's actually sat on boards, but that's not a criticism, it's an observation. But from the maturity perspective, what was quite clear is that we're still, if I put it in human terms, we've probably moved from infancy to child. Some sectors we might even be adolescent, those stroppy teenagers. And the difficulty is this: one, we want to be good, and we use terminology such as professional director. But I don't know what a professional director is. I'm married to a medical doctor. I've never heard her describe herself as a professional doctor. Imagine a professional lawyer or a professional plumber. And yet all of those occupations have vocational or university level training, the sitting and passing of some exams, continuing professional development, and in New Zealand to be a director you have to be the age of majority, 18, not before the court, and not bankrupt. That's it. And if I'm being a little bit disingenuous, you've got to be warm and breathing, which is a pretty low bar. And so membership of the Institute Directors is optional. Professional development is optional. And I think the maturing has probably got another 10, 20 years to go yet, where it becomes normal that for you to qualify as a candidate of a substantive company, so above an X million or a Y headcount or assets, however you want to measure it, but certainly all the listed companies, but down into, but not the small ones, you'd need to be chartered or professionally accredited. And I think that's probably still got 10 or 20 years to go, because there's a lot of talk about it at the moment, but we're not there yet in terms of desire as a community to take it up.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of small businesses in the financial advice space, and one of the things that I often bring up is this irony that we're in a country where it's deemed to be one of the easiest places in the world to do business. And you can set up a company in this country in 10 minutes or something online. Right?
Online.
It's a very, very quick process.
Yep.
And you can become a director, as you say. There's not a huge amount of requirements, and you don't even have to know what the duties of a director are to become a director.
That's right.
And I think that's a significant risk. I think we should have, even, you talk about having a size and some sort of measure over what you'd have to have a chartered director. Well, that makes a lot of sense, absolutely. I think even below that bar, you should at least know to whom you owe your duty.
So two things, and I'm going to point to my two mentors, and I'm going to call them by their first names, just for the conversation. So James. James did some work that he shared with me probably 8 or 9 years ago now, where he over a preceding decade was doing some training and identified through the pre-training course questionnaire that he put out for this program, something like 85% of the people attending this course answered one of the critical questions incorrectly. The question was, to whom do you have to act in the best interest? In other words, what's your focus as a director, right? And it was multi-choice. The shareholder, the company, both, neither.
Okay.
Right? So those are your choices, okay? And something like 85% of the people
probably answered C, both, where the answer would be B to the company.
And most of them answered A to the shareholder.
Really?
Yep. Because I'm put there by the shareholder. They want to make money, we'll make money. They want to boil the ocean, we'll boil the ocean. But the company is a legal entity in its own right. So that's James. Right? Now that was some time ago, and I'm noticing a much greater awareness that you've got to act in the best interest of the company now.
Just a quick point for you, James is based in the UK, is that right?
James is based in New Zealand.
New Zealand, okay.
So that's New Zealand research. In the UK is my other mentor.
Okay.
And he did some work, took it to Parliament actually, and shared it. And when he did so, the blood drained out of many faces in shock at what he reported. So there's 7 duties in the Act. They're the same 7 duties in the UK Act as in the New Zealand Act and the Australian Act, the Corps Act in Australia. And his research identified that the average director, now statistics, I use the word average, but the average director could recall somewhere between 2 and 3 of the 7. So here's my question. And I said to Bob, how could anybody hope to do their job well if they can't tell you what their job is?
And presumably the people that he would have been asking this of would have been quite high prominent directors of FTSE 100 companies and so forth.
A mix. So they were, some of them were parliamentarians, also company directors. Some of them were enlisted, like FTSEs, FTSE 100 or maybe 250s, and some of them were in the AIM or unlisted. So there was a mix, and I'm not sure how many could roll off 6 or 7, but in terms of the bulk, it was down at 2 or 3. It's scary stuff, eh?
Absolutely, yes, and certainly, you know, while, as you say, there were different types of companies, there certainly would have been above the threshold, not below the threshold, if we were talking about it before.
And I just add that this is companies we're talking about. This is not board members of trusts or board members of incorporated societies, different scenario.
Yes.
We apply governance as a term to that activity now as well, but my comments are reserved for the company legal structure.
It is astounding but not surprising. One of the people I interviewed earlier in this series is one of my first bosses, Kevin McCaffrey.
Oh yeah, I know Kevin.
I love Kevin. He's an
good guy,
great guy.
Yeah.
And he would do exactly that. Go into a room of people, and the first thing he says to them is, "To whom do you owe your primary duty?" And he said to me, "I mean, so few people actually will answer the question correctly."
The other thing that relates to it, that endorses it, is we think of shareholders owning the company, whereas they don't. They hold shares or own shares, and those shares give them rights, but the company's a legal person, it doesn't have owners. It exists as standalone. It's interesting, eh? There's all these complexities, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've had to come to understand that because there is a need, I think, for the scalpel, the precision, at times, as opposed to the blunt instrument at other times, and we need to be discerning about that. So we need to understand the landscape across which we're traversing. Yes. And so we need to geek out from time to time.
We do. On that note, I've got one final question for you, if I can. Given your extensive experience in governance and the amazing people with whom you work, what's the best governance advice you've received in your career?
Read. Peter Crow does not know all the answers. He'll tell you that. Others will tell you that Peter Crow's wrong from time to time as well, sometimes more frequently than they or he would want. Because the situation, we're talking about a social construct, right? It's people. Governance would be easy if it wasn't for people. So the group is morphing. The entity within which it exists is hardly static, the company, and then out to the market and society. So you've got many, many moving parts, and they're changing almost as a constant, but irregularly as well. And so the best thing we can do is read, because when we read, something happens in our brain, and I'm talking primarily around reading paper, not iPad screens. That helps us expand our horizons, broaden the context, and build our maturity and wisdom, all of which are absolutely critical if we want to be a good director, because we need to join the dots between what is read, what is spoken, what is unspoken, and bring our experience and our background. And if we've got lots of reading, hopefully we've got background to draw from.
So to draw a little bit further on that,
Yeah.
when you say read, then while it may be valuable to listen to podcasts or
Yeah.
watch videos and things like this, and maybe sort of read the news and press and things on your digital device, there's no substitute for the feel and smell and experience of a good book.
Agreed. And those good books, we're talking about sector knowledge and history, world history, probably philosophy and sociology, because psychology, because that relates to how people think, how people act, what triggers people. And also, if you're reading a long form document, it's very difficult to consume the whole document in one sitting. And so there's this thinking that develops as we work through it over time. Some books that I read, I might only read 2 or 3 pages and I'll go sit them down, because I've just been accosted with such a richness of not so much the prose but the content, that I just need to go, wait a minute, I just need to think about this a little bit. And invariably, when that happens, I end up taking notes.
I was just going to ask you whether you take notes when you read.
So what I don't do is I don't mark my hard copy books.
No.
Some people do, I don't.
No, I don't.
Right? But what I do is use, I've got my iPad pencil, so I'll take notes on the iPad. I'll use my pen in my notebook, because that serves as an aid memoir. And that plays into the blog in terms of the examples that I use when I'm directing or advising or educating. The goal is to try and see around corners, because there's so much going on, and to have some sort of impact in your governance activity. And so we've got to give ourselves the best chance to do that. So the advice is to read.
Peter, again, thank you very much for your time. I love the conversations that we have. They're just absolutely mind-blowing, really. So I really appreciate it. I hope to see you again soon.
I hope so.
And thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.